I see a lot of people, on the internet, and they talk about how nofap, certain nofap people and certain anti-goon, people are they might either say that they're incels, or they might say something even more extreme. They might say something like they're worse than incels, or they're more annoying, as it would be, when compared to incels. And people who speak like this, there's a reason why I might bring up Sadhguru a lot, because he's a very famous person, and he's able to explain this to a lot of people in a much grander, way than I usually am. But what I would say is that people who are constantly seeking pleasure in things like sex and things like pornography, they don't know the joy of life in its most intense way. The most intense, uh, joy of life, they've never actually truly experienced what it is. They don't know what it is, because you see, it's a lot like what Sadhguru said, that when one becomes truly blissful, you don't seek pleasure. Pleasure is only a shadow of blissfulness, right? And a lot of people, the reason why when they do no fap, there's these people who get, what they consider to be all these bad effects that happen to them. And basically, what happens is people go into this flat line. They go into basically what Sadhguru even calls a bottomless pit, right? But then he tells people to look at the superficial nature of how people describe bad phenomenon, right? Because if a pit is bottomless, there really is no danger. It's an eternal free fall, right? You can just jump. Eternal free fall, no bottom, no problem. It's only because there's a bottom there's a problem. But because of how people understand things, that's how they speak. Now, I'm not saying that a downhill spiral, a bumpy downhill spiral that damages the system, like pornography addiction, I'm not saying that's good. Sexual addiction, alcohol, drug, you can do whatever you want, but it will enslave you. And you have to understand that when these people practice nofap, they learn these truths and they develop a certain intensity within them. And some of these people become so filled with this knowledge that they want to spread it to other people. They might seem annoying to you, but they don't really care how annoying they seem, because as it's been said many times by Sadhguru, and, many people who understand, metaphysics have said before, is that only those who are constantly willing to surrender to that emptiness, right? The flat line is almost like an emptiness, right? Only those who are, what Sadhguru would say, are constantly willing to die, right? That's a bit of an exaggeration, but only those who are constantly willing to just fall into the abyss will truly know life. And it's like that while you're going through the flat line. But then, after that, you develop a certain intensity within you, because, see, what happens is your dopamine system goes through a metamorphosis. And it begins to reshape. It begins to become powerful again, like it was when you were a child. and in your meditation is no longer just about serenity. It almost has like a certain intensity within it, because you almost have gotten yourself into a rebirth state. It's very similar to what Jesus says, that a man has to be born again, right, in order to enter the kingdom. Many people speak of being born again through reincarnation, and this can happen, but there's nothing special about that, because that's the inevitable existence. But what the metaphysician is trying to do, what the guru is trying to do, what Jesus is trying to do, what the people who follow the path of the ultimate are trying to do, is they're trying to get you to be born again while still living. Because if you can be born again while still living, you won't need to reincarnate in ignorance. If you're capable of going to the ultimate, you become a being born of the light, and not of the world.